Welcome to Come Rain or Shine with Dan Cockerell. This is the show where we explore the power of leadership and culture on your organization's success. I'm your host, Jody Mayberry, and I'm sitting across a small table from Dan Cockerell. Hello, Dan.
Hey, Jody. Yes, it is a small table. This is the third state within the past few weeks, I think, we've been together recording.
That is true, and the tables get smaller every time. Well, first, we were in Colorado, then Kansas City, and now Dan's home state of Orlando, Florida.
That's right. So today was interesting because Jody and I, just before we recorded, we were trying to figure out what we were going to talk about, which we always have that conversation before we record. And I said, I got a great topic because just before, I'm going to share too much information. Just before we recorded, I had a cup of coffee. I had to use the restroom. And we're at an unnamed location, unnamed area in Orlando. And, they usually do a pretty good job. I won't ding them. But I was looking for a restroom. I couldn't find one, and they're going to open all the restaurants here soon. And I went to a front door. There was some employees out front wiping the tables down, getting ready. They open in 15 minutes. And I said, can I use your restroom? And the lady, the server, said, well, we're closed. And I said, I know, but can I still use the restroom? She said, no, we can't. We're closed. I'm really sorry. Maybe over there you can go. She said, I'm really sorry. So it was very interesting to me. She really was sincerely sorry. She wouldn't let me walk into the restaurant to use the restroom. And there was really no reason she couldn't do that, except she thought maybe she wasn't allowed to, or maybe the rules say we're not open yet. I didn't quite understand. So it reminded me when I got back to the table, I was talking to Jody about it. And I said, this idea of people be able to think on their feet and make exceptions, because we're going to have lunch in probably half an hour. And I'm not going to go there because they didn't let me in their restroom and we could have given some business. So it reminded me of a book that I read years ago called Give Em the Pickle. And it's actually written by Bob Farrell. And if you don't know Bob Farrell, I didn't know who he was either. But I remember when I was a little kid, my parents would take me to Farrell's ice cream parlor for my birthday. And they had this crazy thing where they'd bring in the cake on a big tray and they'd have sirens and they'd yell. And I remember very vaguely how cool that was. And his saying was, give them the pickle. Said when you go to a restaurant, if you work in a restaurant at Farrell's, that's how they train their employees is, you know what? If someone wants an extra pickle with their meal, don't tell them you're going to upcharge them. Don't tell them you're not allowed to have extra. Just give them the pickle. And the idea is, well, many places would say, well, we're not allowed to do that because it's going to add to the food cost. Or I got to charge you. And his point of view is, look, they're already paying you. Give them a little bit extra. And you're going to leave them with remembering how great it was, as opposed to saying they wouldn't even give me an extra pickle for free. They charge for everything. So in this case, I don't have anything against the server who made that decision. She, for some reason, either didn't know she could do that or the leader never was clear about, when someone says wants something, if there's not a reason not to do it, then go ahead and do it. And Jody actually hearkened back to a podcast he did with Lee 6 years ago, I think, a long time ago, and talked about it. And he'll tell that story. But you just got to get your employees, they can follow procedures, but give them some decision-making power to go ahead and be able to do that little extra for people without thinking they're breaking the rules or they're going to get in trouble.
Dan mentioned Lee Cockerell and I did an episode back in 2015 about if your hours, say you open at 10 and someone's outside your door at 10:50, 10:45, just let them in. What's the harm? You should be ready anyway. Just let them in. Then there's a second part to the story. Lee heard from some former Disney colleagues that were on a business trip in New York. They went to eat at a restaurant that didn't open until 11. So they got to the front door, saw it wasn't open yet, started to walk away. Next thing they know the door pops open and the owner says, hey, come on in. And they said, oh, well, we're going to come back. We saw you didn't open till 11. He said, no, it's all right. Come in. Well, being Disney, they're really curious when someone does exceptional service. So they asked him, why did you open the door 15 minutes early? Because we were out there. And the guy, having no idea this group of people are from Disney, said, I listened to a podcast called Creating Disney Magic. And Lee Cockerell said, if someone's outside your door before your hours, just open it, let them in. And he took it to heart and he did it. And now, 6 years later, we're still talking about it. One little act, and we're still talking about it all these years later. So it's very simple. You think, did it really put them out to open the doors 15 minutes early? No, probably not. But if he wasn't the owner, and I'm guessing this owner would have trained his people to give him the pickle, to open the door. But if it had been someone else who wasn't empowered, didn't know they could open the door 15 minutes early, this group of Disney executives would have just walked away.
Yeah, so it's just, this is really mindset. Are you willing just to go a little bit, and I'm not even call it above and beyond. For me, it's just common sense. But doing that little extra for people, and if, it might cost you a little bit. The pickle might cost you, 10 cents. Or going to the restroom may cost you nothing. And I think that's why it's so important, and we talked about this before, to have quality standards to help employees make decisions based on some framework. So once again, if I was, the way I would have gone through that decision, if I was trained properly and I was that server, was, okay, let's say I have safety, courtesy as two of my quality standards. Is it unsafe to let this guy in 15 minutes early to use the restroom in our restaurant? Well, if they were mopping the floors up or scrubbing or doing something, yeah, it might have been. Now, I'm thinking they probably weren't doing that 15 minutes before they open. The next is I'd say, okay, let me look at courtesy. If it's safe to do it from a courtesy perspective, should I do this? Well, absolutely I should, and let them go in. So on one hand, this is a little nitpicky, but on the other hand, I just see this happen every day when you're asking for little extra things from employees and places. Do you have a pen I could borrow? And sometimes, and lots of times they say, yeah, no problem. A lot of times they just say, well, we can't do that. And when you really push the issue to ask why, they don't know. They just know that's the rule. And they just expect that, well, if I do that, the manager's going to say, why did you do this? And it goes down a whole path. So I think proactive communication is so important to let people know they can make that decision. I'll use another story that Valerie uses. She was up in Canada years ago at a conference, and she was checking out. And so she had her luggage up in her room, and she asked for a late checkout. She'd called down and said, can I get a late checkout? And the lady said, well, I'm not sure. And she said, well, when can you know? She said, well, my manager comes in at 9, and we have a train going by here at our unnamed location. There it goes. All right. The train just passed by. Those little kids were really happy. So she said, well, I'm not sure. She said, well, when can you tell me? She said, well, I need to get permission from the manager. She said, well, okay, where's the manager? So, well, the manager doesn't get in until 9. I said, okay, well, I need to know now because I need to figure out if I have to pack all my stuff up and bring it down or if I can leave it in the room. And what it came down to is, Val, when she and I were talking, said, well, why can't you give a late checkout? Well, because if we get too many late checkouts, then the housekeepers run behind and they have to pay overtime because they clean all the rooms. She says, well, how many late checkouts can you do every day? She said, well, probably about 30. She said, so why can't you just give me a late checkout? And as soon as you get to 30 people requesting late checkouts, then the manager needs to approve it. And, obviously the employee at the front desk said, well, look, I don't know. That's the manager's job, which was right. The manager set the expectation. But give people some framework, give them some protocols. Storytelling is great. If you can talk every day, what did you all do today to make an exception to a customer request? What did you do today that was out of the norm to help somebody? And start telling stories. And then people will start to see and understand what kind of decisions they can make that are maybe outside the normal decisions. And they could be exceptional in some way. Most of the time, the requests that people have are not exceptional. They are very basic. And if you're really going to have great hospitality, you're going to make a common sense decision as opposed to just leaning on, well, that's just the rule. I don't know why it's done that way. That's what management says.
I have a late checkout story that goes, this is above and beyond. Now, most times a late checkout should be no big deal. Someone needs an hour, they need 2 hours, whatever. Usually no big deal. I was in Kuwait City. We were staying at a boutique hotel. I was with Jeff Knoll. He had gone home the day before. And I asked, can I get a late checkout? I want to explore the city a little bit. That way I can pack when I come back, change my clothes. And then maybe can I just leave my luggage down here? And they said, what time is your flight? And I said, well, it's not until 8 p.m. Checkout in hotels are usually 10, 11 at the latest. And I said, it's at 8 p.m. And they said, don't worry about it. Check out when it's time to go to the airport. See, now that was above and beyond. But I think what had happened, they already knew what their check-ins were. They knew they didn't need that room today, I'm assuming. And they said, what's it hurt? What's it hurt to give this guy who came all the way from the United States to just let him stay a little longer? And that, to me, is above and beyond. But it also came from two things. One, the front desk being empowered to do that. And two, them just being aware of what's going on. Can we really accommodate that? And they knew they could, and they allowed it. And it goes back to what Dan was saying, that usually when your request is denied, even if it's as simple as, can I use a bathroom? It's because leadership hasn't empowered people to do that.
Yeah. So I would, Jody usually asks the question, well, Dan, what can people do next if they want to make sure they're letting their employees make these decisions and help these requests that maybe employees haven't been trained for? And I'd say, one, talk about them regularly. Ask every day. When did you say no to a customer today, and why did you say no? And was there another way to get around that and not say no, but offer an option? Now, I could say this lady offered me an option. She pointed to a different restaurant and said, maybe they'll let you in. Now, this one was open, and that's where I went. So theoretically, she did give me an option, which was good. And then test it. So I will, because I'm in the hospitality business, I'm going to find out who the general manager is of this restaurant. And I'm just going to send an email and say, look, I was doing a podcast. I didn't say the name of your restaurant. Here's what happened, and here's an opportunity. And do you expect your employees to be able to help people? And if yes, great. So, and then test it. And if I owned this restaurant, I'd come back in 2 weeks from now and ask again at 10:45 in the morning and see what they said and see if the training had stuck. But it's really, a lot of this is about culture. And if you never talk about this, you're always talking about the rules. You're only talking about what people can't do. You're going to have a hard time getting people to make the exception and have those little moments where you're giving them the pickle, as we say, and people are going to have positive stories about the little extra you did.
The stories is a great thing to think about. What stories are people telling about you? Do you do what you're supposed to do, and then someone goes and records a podcast and says they wouldn't let me use the bathroom? Or is a story they're telling about, hey, this restaurant let me in? And here's the other thing with this is people like to give back to people that have given to them. Had they let Dan in, good chance we would have had lunch there, because people like to give back to people that have given to them. And in your business, if this matters, you can think about what is a customer worth? If you have to put $1 on it, what is a customer worth? How much would lunch have been worth if we had let him use a bathroom? Or what is the lifetime value of a customer? If I have a business that's repeat and people come back, well, gosh, what does a 10-cent condiment matter? What does letting them in 15 minutes early matter? Because they could be worth quite a lot.
Yeah, and I'd also like just to apologize. We had a whole podcast on the topic of me having to use the restroom, but I'm hoping we're making a good point for you all. Go test this. Test this tomorrow. Have your neighbor or have a friend go to your business and ask for something. Make a request that doesn't cost anything and see if the employee says yes or not. And if they don't blame the employee. Blame yourself, because maybe you haven't trained them to make that exception, to go ahead and take care of that person and make sure you put that training in place and let people know what the standard is and what your expectations are. And you'll have a much better chance of delivering this great hospitality that I'm sure a lot of you out there running your businesses are looking for.
You mentioning we had an episode about you having to go to the bathroom reminds me, we had another episode not long ago about the same topic, and a listener wrote in and said, just wanted to let you know I enjoyed the latest episode of Come Rain or Shine with Dan and you. It started off a little strange and fluid, but wound up informative.
Was that about Margot and the jellyfish?
That could have been it.
Okay, I'm not sure. But anyway, I'm glad someone's listening and paying attention.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, Dan, there's one company that comes to mind when we talk about going just a little bit further, doing just a little bit more for customers.
It is, because they go over the top every time for their clients, because they know if they do a good job, you'll go back to them and book again. You know who that's with, Jody?
That is Magical Vacation Planner.
That's right.
That's right. For example, if they had a restaurant, they'd let you come in early and use the bathroom. I bet they would, Dan.
I would not mind testing them on that.
So Magical Vacation Planner, here, this is a great thing. They know if they do a great job, you're going to come back, because they want to serve you every year you go on vacation. I think I've heard it said, Dan, most repeat guests at Disney World come back every 3 years. Is that right?
3 to 5 years. That's the target.
3 to 5 years.
5 years, come back. Yeah.
Yeah. So they don't want to just help you with this vacation. They want to help you 3 to 5 years from now, too. You can reach Magical Vacation Planner at 407-442-0257. And Dan, what was the name of the book you mentioned again?
Give 'em the Pickle by Bob Farrell, Farrell.
All right. If you haven't read that book, check it out. Thank you so much, Dan. And if you didn't notice, we recorded this outdoors. I think you noticed. We're just at an unnamed location this time.
Train, screaming kids, they're all here.
They're all here. Thanks, Dan. And thank you for listening to Come Rain or Shine.